So, for anybody who was here prior to the show listening, all the songs had a theme. I hope you picked up on it. They all had the theme of the sun in there, and this is precisely the topic that I want to talk about today with a guest that we've had on the show before, and who was actually just very recently on the KBS show as well. Um, but it seems almost as if she lives two different lives. There's the woo life where she's into all the woo and crazy stories, the 411 and missing people, and then there's another life that she leads, and it turns out I'm extremely fascinated with this other life as well, because it's in an area that I think we all need to be looking into because it's a very sort of I almost want to say stigmatized area of energy where people they hear about it and automatically think that it's out of their reach. It's out of their realm. They don't know anything about it. It's too expensive. You have to, there's all kinds of rules and all this and that and the other stuff. And what I'm talking about here is solar energy. And the guest I'm talking about is Felicia. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Felicia to the first spontaneous pop-up open mic of the KBS Discord. How are you doing, Felicia?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me. How are you doing, Polly?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this. I know we've been talking about it for a little bit. I think this is going to be an interesting show. The idea I had for it was I really want to, I mean, without sounding condescending or offensive or anything like that, I'd really like to dumb it down. Like solar energy, and first of all, before we even get into that, we might as well tell people how it is that you even know anything about solar power and solar energy in the first place. Like, let's give people a background on the as to why I'm even asking you questions about this, as opposed to missing people in the woods.
No, absolutely. I work for a solar company. I have, wow, going on 3 years now, and I do project management. So I handle everything from helping customers get financing, if that's the route that they want to go, or taking it, and then taking it from that stage, from them signing all the way to install and getting their system turned on. So I kind of know all the ins and outs of the system, and that's how I know.
And how did you get into the industry?
So I left my bank job. I used to do SBA loans, and I was just miserable there, and was looking for a new job. I had always had an interest in solar and renewable energy, and there was a position open, and it was actually for an admin position, so I didn't start out as a project manager. And yeah, got hired, and here we are. Moved my way through the company, and now I'm managing projects.
And so when you say managing projects, that means like people call like you and say, okay, I've never, done anything solar related. Do they call you first, or is there like a chain of command, so to speak, that they have to go through, or do you even talk to people?
So it's kind of a combination. Generally, when I get projects, when they first come to me, it's after they have spoken with a sales rep, and that rep has sat down with them, gone through their usage with them, built a system that would meet their needs, and based on their financial situation as well. And then that's when I start talking with the customer, and I speak to these customers then from the rest of the time. So I'm speaking to them probably on a weekly basis, giving them updates, answering any questions they have. Um, so I do help with questions along the way as well.
Okay, and so let's pretend, like, let's hypothetically do like a mock sort of let's say I was I don't actually know a lot about solar. I mean, I know the basics. I know there's certain pieces everybody has to their solar system.
Hmm.
But let's assume anybody listening to this now or later is, you know, completely green to the whole idea of solar and the feasibility of it being possible. Even, um, how would we be able to break an introductory solar sort of, um, I guess, tutorial on, you know, considerations you need to make before you decide that you want to go solar, um, you know, maybe problems that you would encounter, or you know, other aspects, like maybe including like legal aspects, because I know a lot of people, at least in Canada, um, what they have the option of doing it, and I'm not sure if it's an actual option or if they're forced to do it. But if they hook up enough solar energy to their house, they can sell energy back to the utility companies and get a credit on their utility bill. So there's that kind of stuff that we should probably get into maybe a little bit later. But
Hmm.
so where would somebody start? Like what are the main things to be considered if you're like, you know, I mean there's people that you know, the whole getting off grid. I mean solar energy
Hmm.
is something that's it's self-sustainable as long as the sun's out, right? I mean it doesn't work if it's cloudy, but there's other supplemental things you can do. But solar is a really big one for at least the I guess you could say the prepper community and the off-grid community as well. So what? Let's say we didn't know anything about that. What would be some of the most important things to consider before even, you know, even calling somebody, say like in your position?
Right. So one of the main things that I would recommend looking into is your utility and how they do handle solar because, um, like you said, there's lots of utilities who will, give you a credit back. And the cool thing about that is if your utility does do that, then you can possibly um, overproduce or produce more, during the sunniest parts of the year. Depending where you're at, that might be different. For here in the United States, it's obviously summertime and, late spring, summer, summertime. And during that time, you'll build up credits. You can, if depending on your usage and all of that good stuff, right? And if you build up credits, those can help get you through the winter months or the months that you have less sun. Um, so that would be something that I'd look into first is your utility and what kind of programs they offer when it comes to solar. Um, so that would be my first step that I would recommend doing.
Can I
Because if
can I
oh, go
just
ahead.
sorry, just one quick question. I wanted to ask, and this is a bit innocent question. I'm not recommending that anybody, you know, just go do something without checking the law first. But are there any ways you can actually break the law by using solar power?
Depends on where you're at. For example, in the United States, I don't believe there's any law whatsoever that prohibits you from using solar power. In fact, it we have HOAs, the home association or homeowner organization associations or whatever they're called. Those they used to deny people getting solar, and there was a mandate passed that they are no longer able to do that. So I don't think, at least here in the United States, you can break the law by getting solar. Whether it's on grid or off grid.
Okay, so that's probably, I guess, really good advice because the first thing you should probably do, I get, yeah, is make sure your municipalities or your utility companies and all that stuff are going to be able to play ball with what you're trying to do here. So, other than that, and I guess I mean, I'm gonna guess at one of the most important things is, and that's your like actual location, and at what your ability is to actually, you know, face solar panels in the right direction to get the most out of them. Um, so I'm gonna
Right.
guess that's at least one of the top 10. But let's keep going. So after the all the legal stuff and all the utility stuff, what would you say is like your top you go from like most important down to least important of considerations that you should probably make, and this is before we even get into any of the financial side of it.
Right. So the other thing is that, like you said, I would take a look at your house or wherever you're planning on putting these panels. Is there a lot of shade? Is there, are you going to be able to face them in prime directions? Obviously, here, Northern Hemisphere, facing them south is going to be the most optimal direction. But, east and west facing, those are really great directions as well. But if you can't face them any of those directions, then you probably shouldn't be getting solar panels. It's going to be ultimately more of a waste of your money than anything. So that would be one of the things that I would look into. Shading, if you have a ton of shading, obviously you're not going to want panels because they're not going to have any access to the sun. If you have a little bit of shading, that can be normal and that can be worked around. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Another recommendation of mine would be to, obviously then you're going to want to talk to a solar company, right? And get a quote. And I would definitely get several quotes if you can, and try to, because you don't want to get overly priced, right? So you want to make sure you're getting a good quote for the for the amount of panels you're getting and all of that, and we can get into that as well. But I would. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask what the feasibility is of somebody possibly avoiding going to a company altogether and just and either acquiring the parts or buying the parts separately and building their own sort of system.
So, and that's completely. If it's going to be off grid, yeah, you can definitely do that. You can do your own research and buy your own panels. You can buy your own panels. You can buy all your own equipment. So, your inverters, batteries, you can do all of that on your own. It's just, I guess it depends on how savvy electronically you are or electrically you are. And that's something that I'm not huge on being able to advise on, just because we do have professional licensed electricians that do all of the work, when it comes to that. If you're doing it on your home, you're probably going to want a professional.
Yeah, we're dealing with electricity here, so people don't get any crazy ideas about, like, it's still the same as, like, trying to wire, like, 120 volt, like, socket.
Right.
You gotta, like, no, you kind of don't want to get electrocuted, because solar power
Right.
will hurt, I think, just as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's off grid, I've seen so many people just learn how to do it themselves, just, whether by watching YouTube videos or whatever, that doing their own research. And so that's definitely something that you can do. And, if you have the wherewithal to do that, go for it. But when it comes to your home, it just gets a little bit more complicated because you are connected to the grid. And that being the case, that's where it kind of makes it more complicated. And besides, the fact that you're going to actually be wiring into your electrical panel and then, into the electrical meter base that the utility owns. So that's where it just starts to get more complicated on that aspect.
Okay, well, we can talk about that a minute. So when you say that, like, let's say you had a system that was wired into the grid, but let's say the grid went down, would the grid be able to take your power without you being able to stop them? Like, or is there like would you be able to sort of turn the the faucet off that's going to the grid, which is now down, so like you could reroute that energy back into your system? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, so let me give you kind of a small rundown on how it works. So when you have power to your home, you're connected to the grid, you pay a utility bill to a power company. Generally, what most, not all, depending on how your utility is set up and, certain things that they require, but most often what's going to happen is the power that you're producing from your panels is going to go to your home first. So your house will use that power first. And then extra or whatever you're not using. So like, for example, you're working during the day, that power that you're producing, your panels are producing while you're not at home, any power that's not, being used by the small things that stay on in your house the whole time when you're gone, that it's going to use that power, but then any extra is going to go back to the grid, right? And then you're going to end up using kind of like those credits um, when you get home that night, when your system's not producing any power. But for example, when the grid goes down, the power goes out, right? Your solar system, unfortunately, is not going to work. And this is a common misconception that we have gotten a lot. The way that you can make it work, though, is if you get batteries. And then there's this thing, it's called a transfer switch. And you can, and a lot of them are automatic. So when the power goes out, they'll automatically flip. And then you can still produce energy, right? And you can use your batteries, and the solar panels will charge your batteries, and then you can use the battery power, or depending on how you have it set up, it could be the opposite way. That's the part I'm not 100% savvy on, but it's doable so you can use your solar power when the power. But if the grid goes down and you don't have that set up, your solar system will not work.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I actually was going to ask you about storage too, because I'm not sure how integrated the solar industry is with the battery industry. Would you touch on that a little bit? Like, let's say, does the typical solar power company sell battery backup options for if the grid does go down?
Yes, I would say they do. Companies, especially like Tesla, they absolutely they have their own completely Tesla owned battery backup system that you can get, right?
Yeah, they have that
Um,
power wall or something, right?
yeah, yeah, and so there, that's probably going to be integrated into your system from the get go, or it might not be. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, that's definitely something a lot of solar companies do offer. My company, for example, we're much smaller, and so we do offer that. It's just expensive right now. Batteries are really expensive because it's like the technology hasn't really been out that long for doing battery backup like this. And so right now, the options that are available are kind of pricey. So that's where it kind of gets, not really feasible for a lot of regular, homeowners.
And there's also another thing about batteries. I'm hopefully you can confirm this. But I heard that there's like certain ways to like there's maintenance you need to do on batteries, and by maintenance I mean like the way you discharge them, how frequently you discharge them, what level you let them get down to before you recharge them, and all that can have contributing factor into the actual overall efficiency of the battery itself. Do you know anything about that?
I know a little bit. I'm not like the huge expert in batteries as much, but I do know that you have your lead batteries, and those ones are more hardy, right? You can keep them. They don't require as much maintenance, so to speak, just because they are hardier, and they are cheaper, but they might not last as long. Lithium batteries, those are generally the better option to choose. They are, they're not as hardy as the lead batteries. They do require more maintenance, and they do require, they can't be stored in they probably should be stored outside in your uninsulated shed or garage where they could get down to freezing temperatures or up to, 100-degree temperatures. Like give them being exposed to that type of weather is not good for them. So that's those are the two main batteries that are really in the market right now. They are coming out with other batteries, but that's about as much as I know on the battery side of things, like as far as maintenance and stuff.
Okay, well, while we're on the topic of batteries, I mean, let's say the grid's down, right? So now you're left to batteries. What is it that people should be looking for as as it go like as it pertains to how much power do they actually need? So let's, I guess, break it down to like your like if the grid goes down, what do you really need, right? Like most people are gonna say right off the top of their head, they're gonna need their fridge to keep running because the
Hmm.
or their food's gonna go bad, right? So that would be like one of the main things. Maybe depending on where you live, you'll need a source of heat, but maybe not because you could just build fires or whatever. But what do you think would be like the maybe people have electric water heaters or something like that. What I'm asking is, what do you think the minimum requirement for, let's say, total grid down? Um, what would be the minimum requirement of power that you would even need to generate?
Well, definitely, obviously it depends on all that you have in your home, but if you have, I would definitely say your fridge. And then I would definitely say if you have like a freezer, like a backup freezer or a deep freezer, I would definitely back that up as well. If you're able to, depending on how much, money you want to spend and all that, you could definitely do your heater because, if you have like a gas heater, for example, but, you need the electrical to spark it, that's not gonna, that would probably not use too much power, but I'm not 100% well on the fan. So, that can get to a much larger type of power usage. But I guess it kind of all depends. I would definitely what I would do if it were me personally, I would do my fridge, deep freeze, and if I could, depending on the time of the year, my heater. Because I mean, if it's in the summer that the grid goes down, I'm not going to use my heater, right? But if it's in the dead of winter, then I'm going to want that. So um, that would be what I would do
Okay,
because we can get by without lights,
right.
so
So what I want to ask is, let's say I wanted to buy a fridge or a heater or something like that that would be a good fit for a grid down solar setup. What would I be looking for? Would I be looking for watts, amps, volts? Like, I mean, we don't know anything about anything right now. So, like, um, what is it that we need to consider when we're looking at things that we're going to plug into the solar system? Like, what's going to draw more? What's going to draw less? Do you know anything about that sort of?
right. And honestly, I wish this is where I did know more on this because that I don't know because then you start kind of getting into conversions, right? So you're going to have like a lot of the times people will base battery systems on amp hours, but like when we do solar with battery, we get backup battery systems that are based on kilowatts. I mean, they also have their amperage setting, their amperage readings and all of that that you can look at and do the conversions. But when it that's where it starts losing me. Like I haven't had as much time with the batteries to be able to give you that much information, unfortunately. Just because it does kind of it gets you have batteries, you start looking at amps, and then you're looking at okay, well my fridge uses this many watts, and so that's where it starts getting confusing and more complicated, I guess.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated with why they made that so confusing. I mean, it would seem to me that there'd be like a much easier way of uh, expressing all those variables without so many conversions. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that.
okay, so let's get into like basically the basic parts of if you starting out with nothing, you're gonna need to buy like some basic components, and why don't we talk about those for a bit? Like what is the bare minimum that you need to have hardware speaking to run a solar, whether you have a battery or not? Let's assume we can have a battery, or we have the choice.
Okay. Well, if it's going to be off grid, then that's where you're going to be able to go battery or no battery. If you're off grid, not connected to the power source, then you're going to have a battery, um, probably, or a different type of inverter. So I guess generally your main components are going to be your solar panels and then inverter. Um, Now with systems for your home, for example, that's where you're going to have your solar panels, and then you can have two different types of inverters pretty much. The two main types that are the best would be just it's a one inverter, and then you have things called optimizers that power your panels. And kind of the way it works is that with optimizers, everything is strung together in electrical strings, is what they call them. And so say you have one panel that's getting some shading with optimizers, it's not going to affect your whole system. It'll just affect that one panel, and not the rest of the system really as much. But then if you have micro inverters, that means each panel has their own micro inverter, and everything is strung together and then goes into something called a combiner box. And then that is kind of where like your central source of power all connects into. And with the micro inverters, they're more efficient than optimizers just because they work. It's just like one tiny inverter that powers your panel, and it doesn't, it's kind of almost an independent unit, working all on its own. So you're definitely not going to have any problems with if one panel goes down, it's not going to affect any of your other systems, panels, or anything like that. So that's kind of for your house. When it gets to off grid, it gets, it all depends. They have a lot of different types of inverters that you can just hook up to solar panels, and then you can plug straight into these inverters because it just does the conversion right within this inverter, and you can like plug right into it, charge your phone, plug a mini fridge into it, hair dryer, whatever the case is. So I guess the main things that you're going to definitely need to look at: panels, inverter, and then, how those are going to connect to each other.
So basically, you're saying that you can pretty much, battery set aside, you only really need two things, and that's the collector or the panel and
Mm-hmm.
the inverter. Um, can you explain in the simplest way possible what it is that an inverter actually does, so that people, not even, maybe this is their first solar power discussion, they
Mm-hmm.
they they don't know anything about electronics, electricity. If there's a way, is there a way we can explain what an inverter does?
Yes. So basically, from what I have been told, you have raw power, raw electrical power, and you can't just use that. It has to be converted. So from like DC power to AC power, and I don't know 100% the difference, so I apologize. But it converts the power into usable power, so you're able to do things like plug your charger in, to your walls, in your home. That's AC power. And so that it just basically converts the energy into usable energy, electricity energy.
Okay, so to me that would be similar to any of the adapters that you get with the old electronics that we used to get, where they would come with a 6 volt adapter or a 9 volt adapter or a 20 whatever 100 milliamp adapter. All these different size plugs that you could plug into the wall that go into
Mm-hmm.
different electronic devices that have different electronic needs. I guess that would be a similar thing to what an inverter does. Um,
Yeah, it just converts a lot larger amounts of energy.
right. And okay, and another thing I wanted to get on, before we move over to a different sort of area, is the solar panels themselves. Um, what I think is really cool about solar power is that it's sort of mimicking Mother Nature. It's basically it's photosynthesis. Basically, that's what it. I mean, to me, that it's the exact same thing. Um, and so the solar panel is like the leaf of any sort of plant. It collects the solar energy and turns it into usable energy, whether or not it's electricity or like protein or carbohydrates that we can eat. It's just a different system, but the same process. Um, Solar panels, as far as I know, the earliest recollection I ever had of a solar panel was those ones you get on a calculator, and they would run off of the light in the classroom. That so is that even a solar panel? I don't even know. Maybe it's not. There may be differences, but are there different types of solar panels, and like how far? Because solar panels have been around for at least decades, and what advances have we made in solar panels? I wonder if we could speak about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many different types of solar panels. Generally, the two types of solar panels are monocrystalline and polycrystalline. And the difference is that your polycrystalline panels, those are going to be a little bit cheaper. And the only reason is because they are kind of made up from a bunch of different components, and like put together to make this panel and how it produces. And they just generally don't produce nearly as efficiently as monocrystalline panels, which is basically like if you were to take a crystal from a rock and you cut that crystal out of the rock into one big sheet, and then that was like one whole source, right? It's like cut in one go, made from basically one component, so to speak. Whereas the polycrystalline is kind of like, okay, if you were to get crystals and cut them up and crush them into little pieces and then melt them back together into one piece, that would kind of be it, like how polycrystalline panels work. Now they're just as good, and you can function with them just fine. It's just monocrystalline, they have that. They just have that edge that makes them work just slightly better. So those are the two main that you're gonna find, and but they both work. Yeah, they're both pretty efficient. And then of course, you have solar panels that you can get that are basically on plastic. You can transport them anywhere, and those ones are probably it's sort of polycrystalline type panel. But depending on the panel you get is going to depend on how efficient they run, because each panel has their own efficiency. And what I mean by that is, like, say you have two panels directly in the same amount of sun facing south, getting the most optimal sun that they could possibly get. One panel is probably going to run at 97% efficiency, whereas another panel might run at 90% efficiency, meaning they're going to convert the most of the sunlight that they possibly can into power, right? So the 99% efficient panel is going to convert 99% of the sun that it's receiving, whereas the 97 is only going to convert 97% of the sun it's receiving. And so each panel that you come across is going to have its own efficiency rating, and along with wattage and how many watts they can actually convert into power.
Okay, yeah, and so there's another question regarding panels, because if you think about it, like these panels are all outside, right? They have to be in order to collect the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And we get weather. Sometimes there's hail. Sometimes there's high wind. Other things can get lifted off the ground and blown into your solar panels. How durable are these things? And if they're not durable, or is there anything you can do to like sort of protect them without a detriment to the efficiency? Like I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to cover them up with something, right? Because that wouldn't make any sense. But um,
Right.
yeah, is there anything you can do to like help protect them in bad weather, or are they susceptible to breaking?
So most of the time, no, they're not going to be susceptible to breaking. A lot of these panels that are going on people's homes, they can withstand up to, oh man, I wish I pulled it up before I got on, but it was like 60-mile-an-hour winds and or more, and then like hail going at like 20 miles an hour. Or it could be even more than that. I can't remember exactly, but I've seen a lot of times these solar companies, they will put how durable, like they'll put a video up of how durable their panels are with them like running over it with a truck and like shooting, golf balls at it, and they're pretty durable. So they're made to be in inclement weather. Um, Now, if it's going to be like hurricane, tornado, that type of weather, that's where you might run into a problem. I think it just depends on the solar panel maker. So I can't 100% speak to like that type of weather, but like hurricane weather, you probably be okay as long as you're not getting things thrown at it 100 miles an hour type thing. I think panels generally stand up to 60 mile an hour type things running into them. So they're pretty durable. You don't really need to protect them. If you get hail, they're going to be fine. As long as it's not something otherworldly that's happening.
How about cold temperatures? Because there's times, like, depending on how far north you live, you can go like weeks without seeing the sun actually set. And it would seem
Right.
like if you were to have some sort of like a battery bank up there,
Hmm.
that would be a really good way to charge that. So, like, what about temperature
Yeah.
fluctuations? Like, but I mean, let's say you live in, I don't know, Texas, where it's like super hot and humid and like just all the time, and then sometimes at night it can get pretty chilly. Like, is it gonna affect the panels at all that way?
No, no. Places like, just in regular places like Texas, they're going to be fine. The only thing that you'd have to be worried about is your inverter. If you have one of those standalone inverters that, goes on your house that powers all of the panels. Um, if you don't want that, we generally don't recommend those being in like hot, um, uninsulated or uncooled garages, that get really sweltering hot. And you generally don't want them in direct sunlight, but they're probably going to be okay. If you have one of the inverters that sit on the side of your house and you're really worried about it, you could get some sort of shade covering for it, and it'll be just fine. But even here in Utah, we get up to 100-degree weather, and we get in the freezing temperatures, not super freezing but freezing, and your system's going to be just fine. If you're going up to like places like Anchorage, Alaska, or even some places up north in Canada, we were actually looking at working with someone in Canada at one point to do panels, and that was one of their concerns, was because it gets like negative so many degrees below freezing for multiple days in a row, and that was a concern. And I'm not 100% sure. That would have to be something that you'd probably want to look up specific to your panel, like whatever panels you're looking at. You'd want to look at those specs and see how resilient they are. But as far as regular temperatures, 100-degree temperatures, freezing temperatures, you're going to be fine. Everything's going to work just fine.
Okay, now I want to ask some really sort of, I guess, innocent questions
Hmm.
regarding solar panels, because I've read and I've seen things online that say, just because the sun's not shining, it doesn't mean that your solar panels aren't working, right? You can still be drawing, like, even if it's as low as 30% on a cloudy day. Um, so is first of all, I want to ask if that's possible, because if it is possible, it's going to lead up to another question.
Yes. So if it is overcast, your panels will still produce, but yeah, it'll be probably at like 30, 40%, depending on how cloudy it is. So like just a regular, think of an overcast day, you will still get some production out of your panels. Um, but it's not going to be like the best production at all. And it would probably suck if that was for weeks and weeks on end. That would really kind of suck as far as the production you'd end up getting over that time.
Okay, please don't laugh at the next question, but I'm just going to ask it anyways. But
Okay.
is it possible to power a solar panel indoors using an LED light that doesn't draw very much electricity at all?
You know what? I actually don't know. That's a good question because, I mean, we have daylight type, light bulbs and lights you can get for your plants. So if it, basically mocks UV rays, I don't see why that wouldn't be possible.
Okay. Well, I guess then I'm gonna have to actually just do a small experiment on that. I'll just get one of those, like, I don't know. You know that you can get these little portable solar panels that you can
Yeah,
charge
yeah.
you can charge your phone with or something like that. Maybe
Hmm.
I'll see if I can charge one of those underneath a fluorescent light or a grow light. Cuz you see
Yeah.
where you see where I'm going with this, right? If
Right, yeah.
if you can get a light that draws less energy than what the solar panel produces but still charges the solar panel, then isn't that like kind of free energy a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so. Um, the only thing to take into consideration, because like I have one of those small, like kind of portable solar panels that yeah you plug in that you can use to plug into your phone or whatever to charge it. The only thing that sucks is that they don't take in like indirect sunlight. I used it camping this year, and like charging my phone with this panel, man, it's like an all day full 8 hour type event, and I still probably won't get 100% charge of my phone. So that's just the one thing that like kind of sucks with solar panels is because you need a really high wattage solar panel if you want like quick results. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think you know how a lot of there's this whole thing about that a lot of people are suspecting that they're gonna just unleash this barrage of new technology in the next decade because things are progressing so quickly, and
Hmm.
some of the distraction tactics that they use a lot of times is often technology they've been sitting on it for a long time. I think this is one of the areas where they're really going to try to pull a lot of that stuff is advances in solar technology, where yeah, that's going to be one of the biggest areas. Because another thing with solar is um, there's tons of buildings already out there that are just perfect targets for solar panels, and I mean, in my opinion, any flat surface that's facing the sky should either have a garden or solar panels on it, because
Hmm.
this is the direction that we need to start looking at, in my opinion, because that way we can appease all the Gretas and we can appease all the oil tycoon anti corporation people at the same time. And not only that, but like you can implement more buildings and use architecture as a way of maximizing solar panel placement and things like that. And then we can start to look at vertical farming. And I think all this stuff is probably going to be coming out pretty soon. But solar is definitely going to be at the forefront of that, as well as probably communications technology, which will probably also be using solar at some point as well. Um, so okay, it what are we looking at as far as money goes? What do you think is the most the minimum requirement, and we don't have to be specific. You don't have to give like your company specific prices or anything like that. Just ballpark figures. Just do it in American dollars. What do you think the bare
Right.
minimum? Let's say you just wanted to get. Um, I mean, maybe let's not even consider that we need to power a full size fridge. Let's say we have a backup fridge, like maybe it's a little bar fridge, or and a toaster oven or something like that. So you can, or you don't even need a toaster oven even. Um, you know, some basic electricity, charge your phone, charge your radios,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff, or maybe just one of those battery banks. What
Right.
do you think the bare minimum cost? Just at a safe, like not bare minimum where it's not gonna work, but like bare minimum you could depend on it to at least get you through a couple days without electricity and power, say a small fridge or maybe even a laptop or something like that, so your kids don't get bored.
Right. And it's kind of difficult because I have seen people get 3 kilowatt systems. And so if you do, you know, 3 kilowatt, and that's like 100% covering their offset. So like it's, I don't know, I guess they only like have their fridge run all the time and maybe do laundry once a week and watch TV, and maybe only use one lamp or something. I really don't know it's 100% offset, but they're 3 kilowatt system that could be around $11,000. But for most average American homes, you're probably looking at a 6 to 8 kilowatt system, and that will probably get you probably 90 and close to 100% offset. And so that being the case, if we were just to go off the 6 kilowatt system, then you're looking at probably $21,000, give or take, depending on what the solar company is going to be charging you. And the way that they charge you is per watt. So, for example, you get a 6 kilowatt system. So that's going to be, and say they're charging you $3.50 a watt. Then that's going to put you at, so you do 350, 3.5 times 6,000. That's how you get the number that you're looking at is 21,000. And that's, usually, so that's going to be probably a price, that you will see that's going to be like today's price for most solar companies. Some are going to charge more, some might charge less. Um, and
Okay,
also
wait,
kind of,
wait, wait, wait. Sorry,
okay.
hold on. 20. You said 21,000, right?
Yeah, for 6 kilowatt.
Okay. What if we were to deconstruct it, and let's say we could get the parts separately or perhaps even used? And I mean, because I wasn't expecting a number that big, to be honest. That is a huge amount of money. Like if you convert that to Canadian dollars, I don't even do math right now. It's not that time of day. But that's a lot. That's like close to like 40 grand. Um,
That's why like a lot of people are getting loans to finance their solar system.
well, that's what. Okay, that's sort of what I'm getting
Oh,
at. Is like maybe like is it so expensive so that their people are almost kind of coerced, or I mean, dare I say it, pretty much forced into selling back the energy that they're making from their own system before it's even paid off?
well, it kind of it so here in the United States, for example, I mean, it's kind of difficult. I don't know why. I think it costs that much money because one, the technology is still pretty expensive. Um, Solar has been around, but solar being, powering people's homes has been around for like what, like 10, 15 years maybe. And when it first came out, it kind of sucked. So where today it's definitely better. And, so I think that's probably part of it. Another part is just the labor because that's including labor costs that you're paying someone to put in the time of installing it on your home. And then, yeah, the thing that sucks is that you probably won't see like a return in the sense of like, oh, now I'm going to be making money back type of thing until possibly 10 years down the line, maybe 13. But the thing is a lot of our customers, they really don't, they replace their loan. So they replace their power bill with their loan payment. So so you're not paying a power bill and a loan payment, you're just paying a loan payment. And the way that here that we do in the United States is you get a split loan. So it's split in the terms of like right now, United States government has a U.S. federal tax credit that you can get dependent on your tax liability, but you can get up to 26% back. So on that $21,000 loan that you just opened up, you could get close to $5,500 back in federal tax credits. And then you could put that money towards your deferred loan, pay that off, and then you only have this other loan, which is only 74% of the system. So,
but in 10 years, that $5,500 isn't going to be worth $500.
but it's true, it's not. But if you are able to actually replace your power bill, so if you're paying $100 a month, let's just say $100 a month, and you're able to replace your power bill because your solar system only costs you $100 a month for your loan, right? Then you're not paying any more money. You're not paying any less, yes, but you're not paying any more money. And then eventually, you're not going to have a loan at all. And then you don't have any bill. And you get rid of it altogether. And and it does be feasible, right? But the problem is, I guess the problem is that eventually a lot of utilities, especially here in the United States, because, capitalism, they start charging you more every year. Every year, your power bill is going to get a little bit higher, depending on where you live and depending on your utility, of course.
In your opinion, why do you think it is that they are able to justify charging more for the same amount of utility?
Capitalism. That's really it. People want to make more money. Companies make more money, so they charge more. Inflation. I mean, whatever it is to make more of a buck. Honestly, I don't know the answer to it, except I feel like it's just taking advantage of good people. That's what I believe.
So
And
it almost seems like there's really not much of a feasibility. Like, I was hoping to go into this with like, oh, we're gonna get everybody stoked about solar power, and now it's just like, well, no wonder nobody's doing it. Like,
it's expensive.
It's super expensive. Not only that, but like, if you're gonna do it, it would seem to me that not having a battery system behind it would be pointless.
Yeah, but I mean, here's where you're gonna get even more discouraged. I mean, you could be spending anywhere from an extra, maybe like right now it's looking like 6,000 to $8,000 more just to, have a battery backup system to pair with your solar panels, so that your solar panels, you know what I mean? So like if you're buying a that's covering all your energy needs, right? Or basically all of your energy needs. And then you're going to want a battery backup system that matches your solar system. So then that way, when the power does go out, then you're still getting the same amount of power that you've been using the whole time,
But here, I mean, I've seen these. I wouldn't call them solar systems necessarily. I guess they're more like for camping and like long sort of hikes and stuff like that. I mean, it's a battery and it's bigger than a car battery, and it comes with. I think it comes with 100-watt solar panel, and you can daisy chain up to 4 or something like that. And this thing will power a lot of stuff, including power tools, which apparently draw more. I don't know anything about all that kind of electrical stuff either. But this thing was like less than 3 grand.
More well versed on all this just because I want to know more about it and understand it better. But it actually it's like a lot of power. And so like that's why honestly like you probably want to have a gas generator or something. But they do make these home generators which are pretty cool that you can get, and you don't even have to have a solar system to get one of these generators. But the thing is that they are, they're propane fed, right? Or something like that. And, but that's going to cost, just probably around the $8,000 range, give or take as well, just the generator on its own. It's just expensive. It really is. And it's like so like if you want to get something that's off grid, for example, to do something where you're not spending thousands and thousands of dollars or like tens of thousands of dollars, but like maybe you put $6,000 into it, right? You could get a small system that, could work for you for sure. And you just wouldn't be able to like, if the power was completely down, you're just not going to be able to use all that much power from your batteries. And then, and then you're just relying on the sun to charge your batteries. And that might take, not a couple days to do so, possibly. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't foresee, unless you have, a ton of panels on your cabin to recharge your batteries in a day, like in a 10-hour period, so to speak, maybe 11 or 12.
I find it very interesting that solar power isn't really something that's I mean, I wouldn't consider it to be new. I'm pretty sure it was around in the 80s, but I mean NASA's been using it for I don't know how long. But if you look at all the other sort of technological areas, we've made so many advances and leaps and bounds, and usually technology starts off being super expensive, and usually it gets cheaper as we get better at making it and more efficient at making it work. And it seems to me like solar sort of kind of missed that boat in a way, and I'm wondering if you have any theories as to maybe why that is.
I kind of think I think it maybe did do that at first with all technology, maybe not just solar. But I mean, you look nowadays, to get a new phone, to get the best technology, you're paying $1,000, for a new phone, where you only used to pay like 600 just about 5 years ago. And so I think the newer the technology is, I think just the more expensive it's becoming, and it's getting inflated. And I think with solar, I don't know how much it used to cost back in the 80s or so. That would be interesting. I think I'm gonna, because as time goes on, actually, in the solar industry world, it actually has gotten a bit cheaper. I mean, they used to sell when solar, was kind of at its prime, they were selling it at like almost like $5 a watt. And we're now, people aren't going to buy from you if you're selling above 375 a watt, which makes a huge difference. Like when you do the math, it really makes a huge, huge difference.
And
So
Can I just ask real quick? You don't get to set the price of what you're selling back to your utility company. It's the utility company that sets the price for that. I just wanted to make that clear. Is that correct?
Correct. That
Okay.
is correct. Yeah. And some utilities have really great programs that super support solar, and some make it so you don't want to get solar. For example, we have a city here in Utah, and they legitimately have set up the system so it makes it's not advantageous at all for you to get solar. You will probably end up losing money if you get solar because of the way that the utility has set up their program. And it's because what they told our owner, because he went to go talk to the city about this, because he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, why are you guys doing this? And they're like, well, we're losing money because people are getting solar. So when you have independent utility companies like that we all end up being slaves to, essentially, to get our power, well, they can make their own rules a lot of the time. But the bigger they are, generally, the less they take advantage of people, just because a lot of the times cities, counties, or even the states will step up and be like, nah, we don't like that. That's not good for our people. So, but it's not like you're going to get a ton back in return, but you will get enough return to be able to, build up enough credits over the summer to be able to get you through the winter without your bill really raising too much, or at all.
Yeah. And I have a hypothetical question here. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say let's pretend there were incentives as opposed to deterrents from going solar. What if, let's say, that same city or town in Utah that you were talking about, what if everybody was incentivized to get solar and put it on their property somehow, or on their roofs, or wherever they could put it, with an incentive? Wouldn't that generate, okay, so you still got the utility, generating the same amount of power separately from solar, but now they have this secondary source of power that they can, it's like it's an abundance. So with that being, the abundance being there, you would think that maybe they would be able to provide more power for the same amount of money, or more power for even less amount of money. And it would be a win-win situation, in my opinion. I mean, the power companies are going to be making the money off of kickbacks from solar companies, or like the money they would lose from selling raw energy from where they make it from. The money they would lose from solar selling that energy would be made up in all the other, I guess, red tape, so you could say, I guess. I mean, there's definitely ways to make up that sort of a loss, like by, incentivizing companies and incentivizing citizens to do it. It doesn't make sense to me why solar hasn't. I mean, there are more people doing solar, but I mean, it's like you said, it's an investment. It's a long-term investment, and if we're talking about green energy, and we're talking about the grid going down, and that kind of thing, which is, I mean, I would have never thought the grid going down was a possibility 2 years ago. Maybe it will. I mean, there's a solar mass ejection could take the grid down for a week, maybe even a month, maybe even a year. Um, it's happened in the past, and it would seem like that solar, because it's disconnected from the utilities, would be a good way to go, and that's why I started really initially looking at it. But I mean, it also, if you look at it from the standpoint where nothing happens at all, it's just an extra resource that's, for some reason, it seems to be just being stifled, and I don't understand why even utility companies aren't seeing the opportunity here.
You're at. I mean, so for example, like Oregon, they have a lot of utilities who do give incentives. So their incentives will be like, yeah, you can get your credits, and it'll be this much a watt, and but then they'll also give you like it used to be there was a time where they used to do when I first started working in solar, it was like $3,600 for going solar. And but it's lessened over time. So it changed. It went from 36,000 to 32 to 26, and now it's at 24. And it's because they're not getting as much funding as they used to, because they would get a lot of funding from federal government to incentivize people to go solar, and then a ton of people go solar, and then they're like, oh, we don't want to like if that much money into it, so then they lessen the incentives. And what I've found is that a lot of the time, so like Oregon had a state incentive to give people as well to go solar. So utilities would give incentive, states would give incentive, and then it made it super affordable for people to go solar. So you might still be paying like $3.75 a watt or whatever, somewhere in there. But then you'd get, $3,600 back here, and then you'd get, all of the incentives from the state. So you'd get maybe like another 3,000 from the state, and then you'd also get your federal tax incentive, which you won't see immediately, but you'll see it back when you file for your taxes. And then at the end of the day, instead of paying 21,000, maybe you're paying only like 13. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't know. It seems like even a lot of the incentives that have been sort of presented to people are kind of like they're like double-sided incentives almost.
Yeah, like the federal tax credit, for example, a lot of people don't understand that's all based on your tax liability, and like how many people really know what their tax liability is. And that's a whole thing in itself. I mean, so it is kind of double-sided to a certain extent, like when it comes to federal. But I mean, the incentives that they were giving out at the very beginning, they were, you get that like off the top of your project price or whatever, because then your solar company would get the incentive back themselves. So they'd take it off your project price or whatever, So then you really are only spending out of pocket like 13,000. It's just not that way anymore because there's not funding, and honestly, from everything I've heard, it's just here in the United States anyway, it's just federal government doesn't want to spend that much money on renewable energy, and to incentivize, they don't want to spend that much money to incentivize people to get renewable energy.
And okay, so before we sort of conclude this, which has been an amazing conversation, by the way, I've learned a lot. I hope people listening to this get something out of it too. Where do you see solar going, like now, especially and taking into consideration obviously the times we're living in at the moment, which probably most people is the farthest thing from their mind, solar energy. But I don't know. For me, the way that the world is right now, I think these are sort of the things that I want to be thinking about. Like there's a possibility that having a solar power is sort of at least like an additive to your arsenal of power sources. Like if the grid does go down, even if it's only a couple hundred watts that you can generate, it's something I think it'd be a peace of mind to have in your back pocket. At least know how to. I mean, let's put it this way: if the grid really does go down, all those highway signs on the side of the highway, they've got like some of them have like 4 or 5 100-watt solar panels hooked up to them to keep them lit at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
like wouldn't it be good if you knew how to like harvest those solar panels? Possibly, I'm not suggesting anybody do that by any means. Don't steal solar panels from the highway. But if the grid goes down, who's gonna see you? I guess. And I mean, like. To me, it seems like renewable energy would be like, no one's talking about wind energy or hydro. Like if you live near a creek, you could generate electricity just from the current of the creek.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
it doesn't have to be a lot to, make a difference. Like some electricity is better than no electricity, right? So,
Right,
where do you
absolutely.
see solar power going?
I see the technology getting more efficient. Um, and I don't know, I think it will eventually come down in price. Once there's more options and more companies are actually producing these products, and it's not just a couple companies, out there producing these products, you're going to get, I think, more affordable and better priced, or I mean, better efficient or more efficient type of technology.
Is Tesla
So
involved in solar yet?
yeah, oh yeah,
I mean,
they've been
besides the
putting
battery part, I mean.
yeah, they've been putting solar systems on people's houses
Oh, that's
all over the place.
awesome.
Yeah, so they started, I think, in California. I mean, they've done in I think it was Montana and some other places. Um, so yeah, they're putting a lot of solar out on people's homes. So, but I mean, even with Tesla, like they have great products, but it's kind of probably around the same price, or maybe a little more. I don't know.
What do you think about um I don't know if you've ever heard of the geoengineering sort of theory, but apparently it's a real experiment that's going on over certain parts of the sky where they're spraying nanoparticulates to try to reduce the impact of global warming or climate change. That's the sort of, I guess, hypothesis that they're testing. So, um, it just occurred to me that maybe one of the reasons why solar isn't being pushed at the moment is because uh, we're currently screwing around with technology that's potentially trying to lower the impact of the sun on the planet, which would, I guess, make it harder for solar power to be a viable option. What do you think about any of sort of that kind of angle?
Um, that's interesting because I actually hadn't heard of that, surprisingly. But I don't know. I mean, I I think a lot of I think one of the reasons why the solar industry is not being heavily pushed is because of the gas industry. And I think that if we were, people start going more electric, it's going to ruin these multi-billion-dollar companies and generational type fortune systems that have been put into place, and it'll slowly become no longer viable. And I feel like people are putting their hands in the pot and trying to make their train ride last in this world as long as possible. That's why I personally think solar energy and electric energy is not being pushed to be a super viable option.
Yeah, you know what? I would share that opinion at probably about 80%. But I mean, there's also this argument that I have where it's like, well, these companies, these, petroleum companies, gas companies, fuel companies, um, they have so much money that they could just buy outright, take over the renewable energy companies and just take the money from that. Like, so I mean, I get it. The people, you can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing. There's that sort of like they have the power, they don't want to let go of it. But it would seem to
Mm-hmm.
me that if they have that much power, why wouldn't they just buy these companies and make them, even more powerful money makers than they were previously, because they would have more capital to put into research and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't. So like I do sort of see what you're saying, where it's like all corporate sort of controlled and greed and power and money. But I mean, if I was greedy and powerful and rich, I would just be like, well, you know what? These solar guys, they're kind of right. So we should probably buy everything before somebody figures out how to put us out of business. And that way we can just keep the monopoly going.
No, and I definitely think that's super valid. Absolutely. I think it's because it's kind of more complicated than that in the sense of like the technology isn't 100%, you know, um, like it's there and it's good. The technology we have today is good and it's working and it will work and it should work for the next 25 years easily, and but I think it's just more costly because, you have to, and it's a different type of business that you have to run and you have to actually like sell people and, be a competitor where a lot of these big corporations, petroleum corporations, they don't really have competitors. There's like, what, five top competitors, and then, you know, they all kind of just stay off each other's toes. I mean, except here and there, when it's small business, but they're not really competing with anyone. And, then it costs money to put research into having the best technology, but then, the money that you spend on the research, are you going to get it back based on, the amount of systems that you sell, depending on what you sell them at? Like how much until they make their return back on that? I think, and the only reason I say that is because I work for a small solar company and I just see the ins and outs of like how expensive it is to run a solar company, and there's only like five of us, um technically there's only four of us, maybe four or five of us who are getting like an actual per hour or salary, when we have people who are just purely commission based, like three of them. So like we're really small and it's pretty costly to keep doors open, and there's so many solar companies that have just gone under, and I don't know, and I don't know if that's just money mismanagement or if it's just, or what the deal is. Honestly, it's just a very unpredictable market, and maybe that's why they don't want to get into it, because of how unpredictable it is right now.
Yeah, I feel like the cards are kind of stacked against the market in a way.
Yeah,
And especially
yeah,
in these uncertain times too, people are probably not willing to take very many risks.
yeah, and we um we have had some decline in sales, but like it's been decently steady, which I was kind of surprised at. People are still wanting solar, and but it is harder. It is harder for a lot of people right now, and doesn't it just doesn't pan out, especially in these uncertain times. Like,
Right. Okay. So this means that I'm going to have to reevaluate my perspective on solar power. Um, I'm going to have to, I guess, do my version of ghetto solar power um, to simplify it, I guess, or to make it reachable for people who don't have 21 grand to spend on a solar system. Um,
mm-hmm.
so I guess here, before we go, I just want to. Here's my simplified version of solar power, at least one of the perspectives. If you, let's say, build a house, you're in the northern hemisphere, it's the same as solar panels. You want your windows to be facing south. If you do what Earth ships do, if you don't know what Earth ships are, just Google Earth ships. It's really cool. It's like they kind of use it, what I think they call it passive solar, and that is they just use the windows. The windows will generate heat in the winter and also act as a greenhouse. Um, and they open in the summer to help with cross ventilation for cooling as well. And the cooling doesn't work by the sun, obviously, but um, it's just interesting how just having a mere window can actually be a form of solar power. Um, a
I
window,
have
yeah,
seen
a
that.
window
Yeah.
it'll generate heat. You can put plants in front of it. It'll grow, and some windows kind of act as almost like a mild magnifier of the sun's energy. So I mean, not all solar power has to come from solar panels. Keep your minds open out there. The sun is the most valuable resource that I think we have on the planet, and there's no reason why nobody should be afraid of solar power. I mean, the cost that we just spoke about, those costs are quite frightening, actually. But you know what? It's just that's like challenge accepted for me. There's got to be a way around it and make it cheaper.
Yeah. And don't absolutely look at getting your own batteries and getting your own, different inverters that you can do yourself for off grid. It's doable. Um, the only thing that I just have to say is right now, like don't just expect that you're going to be able to run your whole house off of a few panels. And as long as you don't have that expectation, you can have off grid solar power that can be sustainable to help keep your essentials going. Um, when it comes to this solar realm, a lot of people are wanting to power their whole home. So that is why these systems cost so much, and it doesn't have to cost that much to use solar energy.
Well, here's an exercise that everyone can do. If you go around your house or your apartment, wherever you live, and just start unplugging shit. And
Mm-hmm.
like obviously, don't just do it at random. Like, don't unplug your fridge. Unplug everything else, like in order of least amount of importance to most amount of importance. So I guess your fridge would be the last thing you would unplug, and let's say your TV, depending on what your perspective is on media and that kind of stuff, would be the least amount of importance. And just keep unplugging stuff, lamps, clocks, microwaves, and see what you can live without, and then that'll give you an idea of what you should expect to be able to power. In my opinion, if you're just starting out in solar, you're going to be doing like maybe one or two appliances at the most, and maybe some like USB charging of some external devices, and that's it. So if you need electricity for anything else, then you need to consider changing your lifestyle in order for solar to be a good fit, at least, and not spend 21 grand on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And and if it is something that you can afford, it can be beneficial in a lot of ways, depending on the incentives that your country, state, or utility has for you. And it can be good in a lot of ways if you are able to afford that. And if you aren't, then there's other ways that you can make it work. So
Awesome.
don't give up hope.
Yeah, no, I'm not giving up hope. I'm just now I'm sort of I've taken on, I guess, a challenge to figure out a way to make it way less than 21 grand, at least for an emergency off-grid situation sort of thing, like just to have in a back pocket in case stuff happens. If you know what I
Right.
mean. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, this has been an awesome show. Thanks for coming on at relatively short notice too. This was kind of off the cuff. I hope to be doing more
Yeah.
of these sort of random um, random open mics. I feel like I'm gonna probably get a lot more guests easier this way by not being so cookie cuttered to the Sunday night format.
Right.
I'll still do the Sunday nights, but I figured some people are busy Sundays, and I felt like this was an important topic, and as long as we're not overlapping on any of Mr. Kev Baker's shows, I don't see what the issue would be. If anything, it's just gonna get more people into his Discord chat, which is KBS at Discord. Um, I'm not even gonna I'm not gonna post a link in the chat because it's only me and you here at this point. Um,
Right.
we could probably keep talking about this for another 2 hours too, but I'm gonna keep it under an hour and a half so I can repost it. Um,
Or
Again, thank you so much, Felicia, for coming on. It's been a really good time talking to you, and I've learned a lot.
And thank you for having me. And yeah, it was hopefully, some people learn some stuff, and or there's some information out there that I could provide for someone. And but of course, it could be different anywhere. So, but I'm just glad to be here, and so thank you for having me.
Awesome. And on that, I will play us out with a song by Pink Floyd called Set Controls for the Heart of the Sun. And stay bright, people.